Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Are you?
Hey guys, it's Allie here and I'm finally back with another video. It is officially 2019 and I have been gone for quite some time. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys, and I slacked a lot on filming, editing, and uploading. I had 2 videos that I had worked really hard on. The one was the Emma Walker case, and the other one was Thelma Todd. Something had happened with the footage for Thelma Todd numerous times, and I had to restart the editing process. I even had to restart filming it once, and I basically completed that video about 3 times. And then it did it again, and I decided I just wasn't gonna worry about it. I was getting really fed up with this because I was working so hard on it, and I had really liked how it had turned out the first or second time I had done it, and then that just ended up not working out for me. So I took a little bit of a break, and then I had a really hard time getting myself back into doing research for videos and filming. And today we're going to be talking about the man in room 1046. On Wednesday, January 2nd, 1935, around 1:20 p.m., a man calling himself Roland T. Owen checked into the President Hotel in Kansas City in room 1046 or 1046. He was said to be 20 to 35 years old. He had brown hair, a scar on his scalp, and he had a cauliflower ear. Randolph Probst, who was the bellboy, had helped Owen to his room, and he said that Owen seemed to only have packed a brush, a comb, and a tube of toothpaste. So that's kind of strange because usually when you check into a hotel you would at least have clothes for the next day. Apparently he really had nothing with him. And Mary Soptic, which was the maid, said that Owen allowed her to clean the room while he was still in the room, and he asked that she didn't lock the door on her way out because he had a friend that was supposed to be visiting him very soon. Mary Soptic, I'm not really sure how to say her last name. Mary said that he kept the curtains shut and he kept all the lights off in the room except for one dim lamp, which I believe was said to be placed beside the bed. She told the police that she thought Owen might have been worried about something or afraid, which is why he remained mainly in the dark. So around 4 p.m., Mary came back into the room with new towels, and she said she found Owen laying on the bed completely dressed in the dark. She also saw a note laying on the nightstand that said, "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." On the next day, January 3rd, Mary came back into the room at 10:30 a.m. to clean the room, as usual, and the door had been locked from the outside. So she assumed that Owen had left the room and locked it before leaving so that no one else can get into the room except him with his key card. Or key. I'm not really sure how they did it in that time period. But she said when she entered the room, Owen was sitting in the room with the lights off. So this means that someone else had locked the room from the outside. Owen then answered a phone call while Mary was in the room and said, "No, Dawn, I don't want to eat. I am not hungry, I just had breakfast." Mary then came back to the room once again at 4 p.m. to bring fresh towels, and she said she heard 2 male voices from inside the room. When she knocked, she heard a rough voice say, "Who is it?" When she told them that she was bringing fresh towels, the man had said, "We don't need any." During the night, a guest in room 1048, which would have been right next door to 1046, complained of hearing loud voices, both male and female, But there was apparently a party in room 1055 that night, which could very easily explain those voices that were being heard. The next morning, January 4th, around 7 a.m., the hotel phone operator noticed that the phone in Owen's room had been off of the line for quite some time without being in use. So he sent Randolph, the bellboy, up to room 1046. And despite the do not disturb sign, he still continued to knock on the door. Randolph heard a voice say, "Come in, turn on the lights." But the door was locked and no one had gotten up to let Randolph in. So after knocking repeatedly, Randolph said, "Put the phone back on the hook," and left. And at this point, Randolph just assumed that Owen was drunk, which is why he told him to come in, but that nobody opened the door. So around 8:30 a.m., an hour and a half after the initial phone situation, the phone was still off the hook. So a second bellboy, Harold Pike, went into the room with a passkey. Using only the light from the hall, Harold observed that Owen's body was laying in bed, naked and seemingly drunk. He also noticed that the bed around Owen was darkened. The phone stand was kicked over, so he then fixed it and put the phone back on the receiver. Around 10:30 to 10:45 a.m., the phone was once again off the hook after already being replaced on the receiver, so they sent Randolph again to deal with the situation. When he opened the door, he came across something quite awful, and I'm going to read you his direct quote to the police. He said, "When I entered the room, this man was within 2 feet of the door, on his knees and elbows, holding his head in his hands. I noticed blood in his head. I then turned the lights on. I looked around and saw blood on the walls, on the bed, and in the bathroom. This frightened me, and I immediately left the room and went downstairs." Owen was discovered with extensive injuries. It appeared that he had been tied up with cord around his neck, wrists, and ankles, and it seemed that he had been tortured. Blood was everywhere, even on the walls and ceiling directly above the bed, and it had seemed that Owen's head had been hit repeatedly and that his skull was fractured. Owen had also been stabbed in the chest several times. This had punctured his lung, and there was bruising around his neck, showing signs of strangulation. But Owens was still alive. So one of the detectives asked him about who else was in the room, and he responded saying that nobody else was ever in his room. So after saying that no one else was in the room, Owens said that what had happened was that he had fallen against the bathtub. After this, he ended up being completely unconscious and was taken to the hospital. So according to a doctor, the injuries had happened 6 to 7 hours before Owen was found in his room. Detectives found no weapons and none of his belongings, which for some reason led them to remove suicide as a possible cause of his injuries. 4 fingerprints were found on the phone stand when they tested it, potentially from a female. I'm not sure if that includes the handprints from Harold Pike, who was the bellboy who had put the phone back on the receiver, but Owen had died after midnight in the hospital on January 5th. So that's the basic story of what had happened to Owen. But now we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about who Owen really was and what really happened to him. So when Owen checked into the hotel, he had said that he was from Los Angeles. But the Los Angeles authorities were unable to find any record of a Roland T. Owen. So this led people to believe that this was not his real name. So his body was placed for viewing at the Melody McGuilly Funeral Home. Many people began reaching out to see if Owen could be their loved one or if their loved one could be Owen, and there was no luck. So now police decided to focus on Dawn. And if you remember, Dawn is who had supposedly left a note in the room and who Owen was said to have been speaking to on the phone. So they said that Don could have been the deep voice that Mary had heard through the hotel door, and the police got no results from this search. There was really nothing to go off of with Don, so we have no clue who this guy is or if this guy even existed. It could have been made up, the phone call could have been fake, the note could have been faked, or the person's name wasn't really Don. We have no information on who this Don guy or girl was. So the funeral home had received an anonymous phone call saying that whoever was on the line would send the money necessary to provide Owen a proper funeral, because usually the loved ones pay for the funeral, and they didn't know who Owen was or who he was related to or anything. So on March 23rd, 1935, money bundled in a newspaper was delivered to the funeral home from an anonymous sender. The flowers for his funeral were anonymously arranged with the Rock Flower Company with a card that said, "Love Forever, Louise." So later in 1936, a lady named Ruby Ogletree read about Owen's case in American Weekly. She would then correctly identify Owen as her son, who had left Birmingham in 1934. His actual name was Artemis Ogletree. He was only 17 years old. Ruby had received 3 letters from her son in the spring of 1935 before his death. But these letters were delivered after Owen's death, and they were typed. This was suspicious because Ruby said that Artemis did not know how to type. It was later revealed that Artemis had also stayed at the St. Regis Hotel in Kansas City with another man. And it's possible that this man was Don, but we still don't really know. So in the early 2000s, John Horner, the author of an exhaustive account of the murder case, received an out-of-state call about Artemis Ogletree. The caller claimed to have found a newspaper box containing articles about the murder in a deceased elderly person's belongings. According to the caller, there was something else in the box, something that had been referenced in the newspaper articles. But the caller did not say what this item was, and after that, nothing else would be said about this case. So that's all we really have on the man in room 1046. We know that Roland T. Owen was actually named Artemis Ogletree. We don't know if or who else was in the room with him. I believe that he was tortured, as evidence shows that it really wasn't suicide, but you never know. He could have been mentally unstable and we just didn't know about it, and it could have been like set to look that way. Whoever this Don person was could be the one who murdered him, or this female that we don't know about. It's an unsolved case. Looking into it, it might not even possibly be real. It could have been set up like the entire thing, but we don't know. So if anyone else has any information on the man in room 1046, I would love to hear it, and you can just let me know in the comments down below. Anyway, that's all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys like these types of videos because I plan on doing more. All of my social media will be linked down below. Anyway, guys, I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time.